The massive warship Dreadnought's Edge hung in the darkness of space like a metal beast. Inside its cold halls, 2,000 of the galaxy's most feared warriors prepared for what they thought would be an easy battle. These were the Krex soldiers, creatures who had never known defeat. Commander Bale stood before his troops in the main bay. His red eyes glowed as he looked at his army. Each soldier was 8 feet tall with thick armor covering their gray skin. They carried weapons that could melt steel and shields that could stop any attack. At least that's what they believed. Listen well. Bale's voice echoed through the bay. The planet below is called Earth. The creatures there call themselves humans. They are weak and small. We will take their world in one day. The Krex soldiers roared their approval. They had conquered 43 worlds before this one. Humans would be no different. They were just another species to crush under their boots. Lieutenant. Zorn stepped forward. He was Bale's second in command, almost as large and twice as cruel. Commander, our scans show this planet has strange readings. The air is thick with water. There are dangerous storms. Maybe we should be careful. Bale laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Careful? We are Krex warriors. We have fought in the Yi, ice caves of frozen hell. We have battled in the lava fields of Fire Mountain. What can one little planet do to us? The other soldiers laughed too. They had heard stories about this planet Earth. The humans had no real weapons, no armor, no shields. They lived short lives and were afraid of everything. It would be like fighting children. Prepare the drop pods, Bale ordered. We land in 1 hour. Far below, Earth waited. The planet looked peaceful from space with its blue oceans and white clouds. But appearances could be deadly. The landing zone was a place humans called the Amazon. It was a vast green area covered in trees and rivers. The Krex had chosen it because their computers said it was safe. No human cities, no armies, no weapons. Just plants and animals. They had no idea what they were walking into. The drop pods launched like meteors from the mothership. 2,000 metal containers fell through Earth's atmosphere, burning bright as they cut through the air. They crashed into the jungle with sounds like thunder, crushing trees and scaring birds into flight. Commander Bale was the first to emerge from his Buddha. He stepped onto the soft ground and breathed in the thick, humid air. It was different from the clean, recycled air of his ship. This air was heavy and alive with smells he didn't recognize. "Form up!" he shouted to his soldiers. "Establish a perimeter. Mark the landing zone." The Krex warriors spread out through the jungle. They moved like they owned the place, pushing through vines and stepping on flowers. Their heavy boots left deep marks in the muddy ground. Private Jex wiped sweat from his face. "Commander, this air is strange. It's hard to breathe." "You'll get used to it," Bale replied. But he was sweating too. The humidity was unlike anything they had experienced. Their armor, perfect for cold space battles, felt like ovens in this heat. Within the first hour, the jungle began to fight back. Sergeant Kex was setting up a communication device when he felt something bite his neck. He slapped at it, and his hand came away covered in his own purple blood. A tiny insect had somehow found a gap in his armor and injected him with something. "Medic!" he called out, but his voice was getting weak. The poison was fast. By the second hour, 12 Krex warriors were dead, not from human weapons or human soldiers, but from insects smaller than their fingernails. The jungle was full of creatures that didn't fear the aliens. Mosquitoes that carried diseases, spiders that dropped from trees, ants that could bite through metal. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Zorn said as he watched another soldier fall. "Our armor is supposed to protect us from everything." "It's just animals," Bale replied, but his confidence was starting to crack. "We'll adapt, we always do." Then the rain started. It wasn't like the gentle rain of other worlds they had conquered. This was a wall of water that fell from the sky, like a punishment. It soaked through everything, making the ground soft and slippery. The Krex weapons, which used energy cells, began to malfunction in the moisture. "Sir," called out Corporal Rex, "my plasma rifle won't fire. The power cell is wet." "Mine too," said another soldier. Soon half their weapons were useless. The rain kept falling, turning the jungle floor into a swamp. The Kreks, who were used to fighting on solid ground with reliable weapons, found themselves slipping and sliding through mud. But the real surprise came when they encountered their first humans. Dr. Lisa was a scientist who had been studying plants in the Amazon for 3 years. She was small, only 5.5 feet tall, with brown hair tied back in a simple knot. She wore clothes made of natural fibers and carried only basic tools. When she saw the aliens, she didn't run screaming like the Kreks expected. Instead, she watched them from behind a tree, studying them like they were just another species to catalog. "Look at them," she whispered to her guide, a local man named Carlos. "They're completely out of their element. Their equipment isn't designed for this environment." Carlos nodded. He had lived in the jungle all his life. He could see what the aliens couldn't, that they were not predators here. They were prey. "Should we contact the military?" he asked. "Not yet," Lisa replied. "Let's see how they handle the jungle first. I don't think they'll last long." She was right. As the first day turned to night, the Kreks faced their greatest challenge yet. The jungle came alive with sounds they had never heard. Howler monkeys screamed from the trees. Jaguars prowled in the darkness. Snakes slithered through the grass. The aliens, who had always been the scariest things on any planet, found themselves afraid of every sound, every shadow, every movement in the bushes. "Set up night watch," Bale ordered, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "4 soldiers on each post. Don't let anything approach the camp." But how do you watch for things you can't see? How do you guard against an entire world that wants you dead? Private Tex was on the first watch when he heard a splash in the nearby river. He aimed his weapon at the water, but saw nothing. Then, something grabbed his leg from below the surface. He tried to scream, but the water filled his mouth. The other guards found only his helmet floating in the bloody river. By morning, they had lost 30 soldiers, not to human armies or human weapons, but to Earth itself. The planet was fighting them with everything it had: disease, poison, predators, weather, and terrain that seemed designed to kill. Commander Bale looked at his remaining forces. They were tired, scared, and sick. Many had infections from insect bites. Others had eaten plants that made them violently ill. Their equipment was failing, their weapons were unreliable, and their morale was breaking. For the first time in his military career, Bale began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. "Sir," Lieutenant Zorn approached him. "Should we contact the ship? Request extraction?" Bale's red eyes burned with anger. "We are Kreks warriors. We don't retreat, we don't surrender. We will conquer this world or die trying." But as he spoke those words, he couldn't shake the feeling that Earth had already made its choice, and it wasn't in their favor. The jungle watched and waited, patient as only nature can be. It had been killing things for millions of years. It knew how to be patient, it knew how to win. The real battle was just beginning. The second day brought no relief for the Kreks warriors. Commander Bale stood over a map of the area, but the jungle had already changed since yesterday. New streams had formed from the rain. Fallen trees blocked paths that existed just hours before. This place was alive and constantly moving. "Status report," Bale demanded. Lieutenant Zorn looked grim. "We've lost 43 soldiers, sir. Most from disease and animal attacks. Our medical supplies are running low. The humidity is destroying our equipment faster than we can repair it." Bale's fist hit the table. "Impossible. We are the greatest warriors in the galaxy." But the jungle didn't care about their reputation. Dr. Lisa crouched behind a fallen log, watching the aliens through her binoculars. She had been observing them for hours, taking notes like they were a new species of animal. In many ways, they were just that. Creatures out of their natural habitat. "They're making every mistake possible," she whispered to Carlos. "They're drinking from contaminated water sources. They're camping in areas where predators hunt. They don't understand this ecosystem at all." Carlos smiled grimly. He had guided scientists through this jungle for 20 years. He knew every sound, every danger, every safe path. These aliens were like tourists who had wandered into a war zone. "My grandfather used to tell stories," Carlos said quietly. Stories about warriors who thought they could conquer the jungle. The jungle always won. Lisa nodded. Should we contact the authorities now? Not yet, Carlos replied. Let's see how they handled day 2. The aliens were about to get their first real lesson in jungle warfare. Private Dex was filling his water bottle from a stream when something caught his attention. A small splash upstream, then another. He raised his weapon and scanned the water but saw nothing dangerous. Just a peaceful river flowing through the trees. He knelt down to fill his bottle and felt something wrap around his ankle. Before he could react, he was pulled into the water. The stream was deeper than it looked, and something large was dragging him down. His armor, so protective in space battles, now felt like a stone pulling him to the bottom. The other soldiers heard the splash and rushed to help, but found only bubbles on the surface. Private Dex had become the jungle's latest victim. What grabbed him? Asked Corporal Max, staring at the innocent-looking water. Could be anything, replied Sergeant Vex. Crocodile, anaconda, or something else we haven't seen yet. The truth was worse than they imagined. This jungle was home to creatures that had been perfecting the art of killing for millions of years. The Kreks were just the latest prey to stumble into their territory. Meanwhile, news of the alien invasion had reached the outside world. Colonel Ana Vega received the emergency call at her military base 300 miles away. She was a veteran, soldier who had spent her career preparing for threats but never threats from space. Confirmed alien landing, her radio operator reported. 2,000 hostiles in the Amazon region. No contact with local authorities. Colonel Vega studied the satellite images. The aliens had chosen their landing spot well from a military standpoint. No cities, no major roads, no immediate human threats. But they had also chosen the most dangerous place on Earth. Assemble a response team, she ordered. But don't rush in. Let's see what we're dealing with first. She knew the Amazon better than most soldiers. She had trained there, fought drug cartels there, rescued lost explorers there. If these aliens thought they could just walk through that jungle like conquerors, they were about to learn a hard lesson. Back at the alien camp, Commander Bale was dealing with his first major crisis. Half his soldiers were sick with fever. Their advanced medical scanners couldn't identify the diseases because they had never encountered Earth pathogens before. Sir, reported Lieutenant Zorn, the sickness is spreading. The soldiers are too weak to fight. Then we must be stronger, Bale roared. But even as he spoke, he felt the fever starting in his own body. Something microscopic was winning the Yao, or that their weapons couldn't fight. Dr. Lisa watched the chaos from her hiding place. The aliens were learning that Earth's most dangerous weapons weren't guns or bombs. They were bacteria, viruses, and parasites that had evolved alongside humanity for thousands of years. They have no immunity, she explained to Carlos. Their bodies have never seen these diseases. They're completely defenseless. It was then that Carlos made his decision. We need to contact the tribal leaders. If these aliens survive the jungle, they'll eventually reach the villages. Our people need to know. He disappeared into the forest with the silent skill of someone who had learned to move like the jungle itself. Within hours, drums were beating deep in the Amazon. Messages were being passed from village to village in a language older than any alien civilization. Elder Taka received the message at his village along the river. He was 90 years old and had seen many changes in his lifetime, but never anything like this. Aliens from space dying in the jungle like any other invader. Gather the warriors, he told his grandson Joe. Not to fight yet, but to watch. The jungle is teaching these strangers a lesson. We will learn from both. Joe nodded and disappeared into the village. Soon, dozens of indigenous hunters were moving through the forest like ghosts. They had lived in harmony with this deadly place for generations. They knew its moods, its dangers, and its secrets. The aliens never saw them coming. Captain Rex led a patrol of 15 Krek soldiers through what looked like a safe path between the trees. Their mission was simple: find a clean water source and secure it for the main camp. It should have been easy for warriors who had conquered planets. But this wasn't a planet. This was Earth. and Earth played by different rules. The path led them deeper into the jungle, past flowers that looked beautiful but released toxic pollen when disturbed, past trees that dropped branches without warning, past bushes that hid snakes with venom that could kill in minutes. "Sir," whispered Private Lux, "I think we're being followed." Captain Rex stopped and listened. The jungle was full of sounds, birds calling, insects buzzing, leaves rustling in the wind. But underneath it all was something else, the feeling of being watched. "Defensive formation," he ordered quietly. The soldiers formed a circle, weapons ready. But they were looking for an enemy they could see and fight. The watchers in the trees remained invisible, taking notes on alien tactics and weaknesses. Joe crouched on a branch 30 feet above the aliens. He had been following them for an hour, moving from tree to tree without making a sound. His grandfather had taught him that the best warriors were the ones who struck only when necessary. These aliens were already beaten. They just didn't know it yet. He watched as one of the soldiers stepped on what looked like solid ground. The forest floor gave way and the alien fell into a sinkhole filled with murky water. His armor pulled him down like an anchor. His teammates tried to help, but the mud was too deep and too soft. Another soldier lost to the jungle's natural traps. By the third day, Commander Bale's army of 2,000 had shrunk to fewer than 1,500. They had lost soldiers to disease, drowning, poisoning, and predator attacks. Their weapons were failing, their equipment was breaking down, and their morale was shattered. But the worst was yet to come. Dr. Lisa finally made contact with the outside world. Her satellite phone crackled to life and she spoke directly to Colonel Vega. "Colonel, this is Dr. Lisa in the Amazon. I've been observing the alien force for 3 days. They're not adapting well to the environment. I estimate they've lost several 100 soldiers already." "What's your assessment, Doctor?" Colonel Vega asked. "They're dangerous individually, but they don't understand Earth ecology. They're fighting the wrong enemy. Instead of preparing for human resistance, they should have prepared for Earth itself." Colonel Vega smiled grimly. "Thank you, Doctor. Continue your observations. We're moving response teams into position, but it sounds like you might not need us." As night fell on the third day, the surviving Krex warriors huddled in their camp like frightened children. The jungle surrounded them with sounds of hunting predators and unseen dangers. Commander Bale stared into the darkness and realized a terrible truth. They weren't the hunters here. They were the prey, and the real hunt was just beginning. The fourth day brought disaster from the sky. Commander Bale woke to the sound of thunder, but this wasn't the gentle rumble they had heard before. This was something much worse, the roar of an approaching storm system that would make their previous troubles seem like minor inconveniences. "Sir?" Lieutenant Zorn rushed into the command tent, water already dripping from his armor. "Weather scanners are showing a massive storm front moving in. The readings are impossible." Bale looked at the data and his red eyes widened. Wind speeds of over 100 miles per hour. Rainfall measured in feet, not inches. Lightning strikes every few seconds. This wasn't just weather, this was Earth showing its true power. "How long until it hits us?" Bale asked. "It's already here, sir." The first gust of wind knocked 3 soldiers off their feet. The second gust flattened their communication equipment. By the time the real storm arrived, the Krex realized they were facing something their armor and weapons couldn't fight. Dr. Lisa and Carlos had taken shelter in a cave they knew about, deep enough to stay dry but close enough to watch the aliens. Lisa checked her weather radio and shook her head. "This is a big one," she told Carlos. "Category 5 hurricane strength winds, and it's going to sit over this area for days. Those aliens picked the worst possible time to visit the Amazon." Carlos nodded. "My people have stories about storms like this. They say the jungle uses them to clean house, to wash away anything that doesn't belong." The rain hit like a wall of water falling from the sky. Within minutes, the Krex camp was flooded. Their advanced equipment, designed for the vacuum of space, began failing as water poured into every circuit and component. Private Hex tried to keep his plasma rifle dry, but the rain was too heavy. Water seeped through the weapon's seals and into its power core. When he tried to fire it, sparks flew and the weapon died in his hands. "Weapons are down!" he shouted over the storm, but his voice was lost in the wind. All around the camp, similar scenes played out. Energy shields flickered and died. Communication devices went silent. Medical scanners stopped working. The Kreks were discovering that their technology was useless against Earth's raw natural power. The wind was even worse than the rain. It picked up branches and hurled them like spears. It knocked over trees that had stood for centuries. The aliens' temporary shelters were swept away like paper, leaving them exposed to the storm's full fury. Sergeant Core was trying to secure a supply crate when a falling tree branch struck him in the head. His helmet cracked and the jungle's poisonous air rushed in. Within minutes, he was struggling to breathe as alien bacteria invaded his lungs. "Medic!" called his squad, but the medics were dealing with dozens of similar emergencies. The storm was breaking both their equipment and their bodies. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Colonel Vega watched the weather reports with growing amazement. The storm system was enormous, covering thousands of square miles of Amazon rainforest. Any human caught in it would struggle to survive, but at least humans understood the dangers. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're getting fragmentary signals from the alien landing zone. Their transmissions are breaking up, but it sounds like they're in serious trouble." Colonel Vega nodded. "What about our indigenous contacts?" Elder Taka's people have taken shelter in their traditional storm caves. They've been through hurricanes like this before. They know how to survive. That was the difference, Colonel Vega realized. Humans had evolved alongside Earth's dangers. These aliens were visitors who didn't understand the rules. Elder Taka sat in the sacred cave with 30 members of his tribe, including his grandson Joe. The cave had protected their people from storms for hundreds of years. Their ancestors had chosen this place because they understood the jungle's moods. "Grandfather," Joe asked, "will any of the Sky Warriors survive this storm?" Taka listened to the wind howling outside. "Some might live through the wind and rain, but the real test comes after. The jungle will be different when the storm passes. Hungrier, more dangerous. The survivors will face Earth's true fury." He was right. As the storm raged on, it was changing the jungle in ways that would make survival even harder for the aliens. Rivers that had been shallow streams became raging torrents. Solid ground became swampy marshes. Animals that had been hiding from the aliens were now displaced and angry, searching for new territory. Venomous snakes, aggressive insects, and hungry predators were all being driven toward the alien camp. By the second day of the storm, Commander Bale's army had shrunk to under 1,000 soldiers. The storm hadn't killed them directly. Earth rarely worked that simply. Instead, it had weakened them, sickened them, and left them vulnerable to everything else that wanted them dead. Captain Rex led a desperate mission to find higher ground. His squad of 12 soldiers slogged through knee-deep water, trying to reach a hill they could see in the distance. But the jungle had other plans. The water around their feet began to move in ways that water shouldn't move. Something large was swimming beneath the surface, something that had been disturbed by the flooding and was looking for food. "Movement in the water," Rex shouted, raising his broken weapon. But what could he do against a 20-foot anaconda that was perfectly designed for underwater hunting? The snake struck like lightning, wrapping around Private Fox before anyone could react. The alien's armor, so protective against energy weapons, was useless against the crushing power of nature's perfect predator. Fox's teammates tried to help, but the snake dragged him under the murky water. They found only bubbles and the echo of a scream that was cut short. "Fall back," Rex ordered, but there was nowhere safe to retreat to. The entire jungle had become a death trap. Dr. Lisa watched the destruction from her cave and took careful notes. As a scientist, she was fascinated by what she was seeing. The aliens weren't just fighting individual threats. They were fighting an entire ecosystem that had evolved to kill efficiently. "Look at this," she showed Carlos her observations. "They've lost over half their force, and they haven't faced a single human soldier yet. Earth itself is defeating them." Carlos nodded. "My grandfather always said the jungle tests everyone who enters. These aliens are failing the test." On the third day of the storm, something even worse happened. The constant rain had washed away the natural barriers that kept certain areas of the jungle separated. Now predators from different regions were meeting and competing for territory, right in the middle of the alien camp. A jaguar, one of the jungle's apex predators, stalked into the camp looking for food. It had been driven from its territory by flooding and was hungry, angry and desperate. To the jaguar, the alien smelled like meat. Private Jex was standing guard when he saw yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness. He aimed his weapon, but remembered, it was broken. He tried to run, but his heavy armor made him slow and clumsy. The jaguar moved like liquid shadow, covering 30 feet in a single leap. Its claws found the gaps in the alien's armor that insects had already discovered. Its teeth were designed to crush skulls, and alien skulls were no different from any other prey. The attack lasted only seconds, but it sent a wave of terror through the remaining soldiers. They were apex predators on their homeworlds, but here, they were just another link in the food chain, and not at the top. By the fourth day, the storm began to weaken, but the damage was done. Commander Bale looked at his remaining forces. Fewer than 700 soldiers out of the original 2,000. They were sick, exhausted, demoralized, and armed with broken weapons. "Sir," Lieutenant Zorn approached him. "The men are asking about extraction. Maybe we should contact the ship and request evacuation." Bale's red eyes burned with fury, but underneath the anger was something new. Fear. For the first time in his long military career, he was facing an enemy he couldn't defeat with superior firepower or tactical brilliance. "We don't retreat," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We are Krex warriors. We find a way to win." But as he spoke those words, he could hear the jungle around them coming back to life after the storm. New sounds, new dangers, new threats that his people had never encountered. The storm was over, but Earth's fury was just beginning. The real battle was about to start, and the aliens were already losing. Elder Taka emerged from his cave and breathed the clean air after the storm. The jungle felt different now, charged with energy and ready for what came next. "Now," he told Joe, "now we see what these sky warriors are really made of." The test of strength was over. The test of survival had begun. The fifth day after the storm brought a deadly silence to the jungle. Commander Bale stood among the wreckage of his once mighty army, counting the survivors. 637 soldiers remained from the original 2,000. Their armor was cracked, their weapons mostly broken, and their confidence shattered. But Commander Bale was not ready to surrender. In his mind, retreat was impossible. The Krex Empire had never lost a battle, and he would not be the first commander to break that tradition. "Gather the squad leaders," he ordered Lieutenant Zorn. "We're going to make our final push to the extraction point." The extraction point was a clearing 15 miles north of their current position. Their mothership would send shuttles there in 2 days. All they had to do was survive the journey through the deadliest jungle on Earth. Lieutenant Zorn looked at the map with growing dread. "Sir, that route takes us through the deepest part of the rainforest. Our scouts report increased animal activity in that area. Then we'll fight our way through," Bale replied. "We are still Krex warriors. We still have weapons that work. We can still complete this mission." But Bale was wrong about many things. He was wrong about having working weapons. Most of their equipment had failed completely. He was wrong about completing the mission. The mission was already lost. And he was most wrong about fighting their way through, because the jungle was no longer fighting them alone. Dr. Lisa had finally made contact with Colonel Vega's advance team. Captain Mike Santos arrived at her location with 20 elite soldiers, all experts in jungle warfare. They moved through the forest like ghosts, using skills learned from years of fighting in similar terrain. "Doctor," Captain Santos said as he studied her notes, "your observations are remarkable. These aliens have lost over 60% of their force without facing any human resistance." "The jungle is doing our job for us," Lisa replied. "But there's something else. I've been monitoring their communications. They're planning to move toward an extraction point. If they reach it, some of them might escape." Captain Santos nodded. Colonel Vega anticipated this. We have orders to ensure that doesn't happen. Can you guide us to intercept them? Lisa looked at Carlos, who smiled grimly. We know every path in this jungle. If those aliens want to reach their extraction point, they'll have to go through us. Meanwhile, Elder Taka had made his own decision. He stood before 50 of his best warriors, including his grandson Joe. These men had lived in the jungle their entire lives. They knew its secrets, its dangers, and most importantly, how to use both as weapons. The Sky Warriors are weak now, Taka told his people. The jungle has tested them and found them wanting. But they still threaten our home. It's time to show them that this land belongs to us. Joe checked his bow and arrows. The tips were coated with poison from local frogs, a toxin that could drop a jaguar in seconds. His grandfather had taught him that the jungle provided everything a warrior needed if he knew how to ask. How do we fight enemies with metal skin? Asked one of the younger warriors. Taka smiled. The same way we fight any enemy. We use their strengths against them. Their metal skin makes them heavy and slow. Their weapons need power that the jungle has taken away. They are blind and deaf in our world. We are not. The three human forces, military, scientific, and indigenous, began to coordinate their efforts. They didn't need radios or complex communication systems. They used methods that had worked for thousands of years. Bird calls, animal sounds, and signals that only trained eyes could see. Commander Bale began his final march with his remaining soldiers. They moved in a tight formation, weapons ready, scanning the jungle for threats, but they were looking for the wrong kind of enemy. The first attack came from above. Joe and his warriors had positioned themselves in the trees along the aliens' route. They waited until the column was directly below them, then struck with silent precision. Poisoned arrows fell like rain. The aliens' armor protected them from direct hits, but the arrows found gaps at joints and seams. Within minutes, a dozen Krex soldiers were down, convulsing as jungle toxins invaded their bloodstreams. "Contact!" shouted Sergeant Tex, trying to aim his weapon at the trees. But the attackers were already gone, vanished into the green canopy like they had never existed. "Where are they?" demanded Commander Bale. "Where did they go?" The answer came from everywhere and nowhere. The jungle itself seemed to be attacking them. Branches fell at precisely timed moments. Vines tangled their feet. Hidden pits opened under their boots. Every step forward became a battle against the environment itself. Captain Santos and his team struck next. They had positioned themselves along a narrow path that the aliens had to cross. Using tactics perfected in years of jungle warfare, they turned the terrain into their ally. "Take out their leaders first," Santos whispered to his men. "Confusion kills armies faster than bullets." The attack was swift and devastating. Human soldiers emerged from the undergrowth like predators, striking at the alien formation's weak points. They used the jungle's natural cover to appear and disappear at will, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Lieutenant Zorn fell to a sniper's bullet that seemed to come from the trees themselves. 3 squad leaders died in the first minute of the ambush. The alien formation began to break apart as soldiers sought cover behind trees and rocks. But the jungle offered no real shelter. Every hiding place came with its own dangers. Spider nests, snake dens, or patches of ground that gave way to sinkholes filled with murky water and hungry predators. Dr. Lisa watched the battle from a safe distance, still taking notes. "They're not just fighting humans now," she observed. "They're fighting an entire ecosystem that's been turned against them." Carlos nodded. "The jungle recognizes its own. We belong here, they don't. The aliens tried to fight back, but their broken weapons were no match for enemies who knew every rock, every tree, every shadow in the forest. The humans struck and vanished, wearing down the alien force like water wearing a waystone. Private Nex found himself separated from his unit during the chaos. He stumbled through the jungle, lost and afraid, his armor torn and his weapon useless. Every sound made him jump. Every shadow could hide an enemy. He came to a small clearing and thought he had found safety, but the clearing was a trap. Joe emerged from the trees like a spirit, his bow drawn and ready. The 2 warriors faced each other across the small space. Alien and human, invader and defender. Please, Private Neck said in his broken English. I don't want to fight anymore, I just want to go home. Joe looked at the alien soldier and saw fear in his eyes. For a moment he hesitated. This creature was young, scared and defeated. But then he remembered his grandfather's words about protecting their home. The arrow flew true. Private Necks fell, without understanding that he had just met Earth's judgment. By nightfall, Commander Bale's army had shrunk to fewer than 200 soldiers. They huddled in a defensive circle, surrounded by sounds of hunting predators and unseen enemies. Their extraction point was still miles away, and they had no idea how many would survive to see it. Sir, a wounded soldier approached Bale. We can't go on like this. We're being hunted. We're dying. Bale looked at his remaining troops. These were the finest warriors in the galaxy, reduced to frightened shadows of their former selves. The jungle had broken them in ways that no enemy army ever could. We keep moving, he said, but his voice was hollow. We reach the extraction point. We complete the mission. But deep in his heart, Commander Bale knew the truth. The mission was already over. They had lost not to superior technology or greater numbers, but to a world that had spent billions of years learning how to kill. As the night deepened, the jungle's nocturnal hunters emerged. Jaguars, snakes, and other predators that had been displaced by the storm were hungry and territorial. The aliens' camp became a feeding ground for creatures that had never seen beings from other worlds, but recognized the smell of weakness and fear. The survivors of the once mighty Krex army could only wait and pray that morning would bring them closer to escape. But in the Amazon, dawn often brought only new dangers. Elder Taka sat by his fire, listening to the sounds of battle in the distance. The Sky Warriors are learning, he told Joe. Learning that strength means nothing without wisdom. Technology means nothing without understanding. Conquest means nothing without respect. Joe nodded. Will any of them survive, Grandfather? Taka looked toward the alien camp and smiled sadly. Perhaps. The jungle will decide. It always does. The final battle was about to begin. Dawn broke over the Amazon with the sound of desperation. Commander Bale counted his remaining soldiers in the pale morning light. 112 warriors stood before him, all that remained of the mighty force that had come to conquer Earth 6 days ago. The extraction point was only 3 miles away, but those 3 miles might as well have been 3,000. The jungle between them and safety was alive with human hunters, displaced predators, and natural traps that seemed designed by nature itself to kill invaders. Sir, Lieutenant Zorn limped forward, his armor cracked and his left arm hanging useless at his side. The men are asking, is retreat possible? Can we call for early extraction? Bale's red eyes blazed with the last flames of his pride. We are Krex warriors, we do not call for help. We reach the extraction point on schedule or we die trying. But even as he spoke those words, Bale knew they were hollow. His army was already dead. They just hadn't stopped breathing yet. 3 miles away, Colonel Vega stood at the extraction clearing with 200 elite soldiers. They had arrived during the night, moving through the jungle with the skill that only humans who understood this environment could possess. Set up the perimeter, she ordered. Anti-aircraft weapons on the high ground. If any alien ships try to land here, they won't leave. Captain Santos emerged from the jungle with his reconnaissance team. Colonel, the aliens are moving toward us. Maybe 100 survivors, all wounded, most of their equipment destroyed. Good, Colonel Vega replied. Let them come. Let them see what happens when you underestimate Earth. Dr. Lisa and Carlos had taken position on a ridge overlooking the extraction point. Through her binoculars, Lisa could see the human forces preparing their final trap. But she also saw something else that worried her. Carlos, look at the sky. Those clouds are building again. Carlos followed her gaze and nodded grimly. Another storm system, bigger than the last one. If those aliens don't die in battle, the weather will finish them. The jungle seemed to sense the approaching end. Animals that had been hiding emerged to watch the final act of this deadly play. Howler monkeys called from the trees. Colorful birds sang in the canopy. Even the insects seemed to buzz with anticipation. Elder Taka and his warriors had taken positions along the aliens' route. Joe crouched behind a fallen log, his bow ready, watching the broken army stumble through the forest. These creatures that had once seemed so powerful now looked like lost children. "Grandfather," he whispered, "they're already defeated. Do we need to fight them?" Taka's old eyes were sad but determined. "We fight to protect our home, grandson, but also to send a message to the stars. Earth is not defenseless. Earth is not weak. Earth belongs to those who understand it." The first clash came at a river crossing. The aliens had no choice but to wade through the dark water, exposed and vulnerable. Captain Santos and his team were waiting on the far bank, hidden in the undergrowth. The attack was swift and merciless. Human soldiers emerged from concealment like jungle cats, their weapons finding targets with deadly precision. Alien after alien fell into the muddy water, their blood mixing with the river that had already claimed so many of their comrades. Commander Bale watched his soldiers die and felt something break inside him. Not his body. That was already broken by disease and exhaustion. Something deeper. His belief in Krek's superiority. His faith in conquest through force. His understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. "Fall back," he shouted. But there was nowhere to retreat to. The humans had them surrounded. The jungle was against them, and the sky was preparing to unleash another storm. Private Rex, one of the youngest Krek's soldiers, threw down his broken weapon and raised his hands. "I surrender," he called out in broken English. "Please, I surrender." The human soldiers hesitated. They had been fighting an invasion force, but this creature before them was just a scared child in broken armor. Captain Santos made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. "Take him alive," he ordered, "and any others who surrender. They need to take a message back to their people." 7 more aliens threw down their weapons. They were wounded, sick, and completely defeated. The fight had gone out of them like air from a punctured balloon. But Commander Bale was not ready to surrender. With 30 of his most loyal soldiers, he made a final desperate charge toward the extraction point. It was suicide, but it was the only choice that let him die as a Krek's warrior. The charge lasted exactly 90 seconds. Human weapons designed for this environment and maintained by soldiers who understood their tools cut down the aliens with mechanical precision. Commander Bale fell just 50 yards from the clearing where his shuttles were supposed to land. As he lay dying, he looked up at the green canopy overhead and finally understood. This wasn't just a planet. This was a living weapon that had been preparing for invaders for billions of years. Every tree, every animal, every drop of water was part of an immune system designed to destroy threats. The Kreks hadn't lost to humans. They had lost to Earth itself. The storm struck just as the last shots were fired. Rain fell in sheets, washing the blood from the battlefield and returning the jungle to its eternal green silence. The surviving aliens, 8 wounded prisoners, huddled under human guard as the weather raged around them. Dr. Lisa recorded her final observations. Day 6 of the alien invasion. Of approximately 2,000 hostile forces, 8 survivors remain in human custody. Cause of losses, 40% environmental factors, 30% indigenous wildlife, 20% human resistance, 10% disease and equipment failure. Recommendation: Earth's natural defenses are more effective than any military could be. 3 days later, the alien rescue shuttles arrived at the extraction point. They found only empty jungle and a few pieces of melted equipment. No signs of their missing army. No indication of what had happened to 2,000 of the galaxy's finest warriors. The 8 survivors were released at the landing site. They stumbled onto their rescue ships like ghosts, their eyes hollow with trauma, their bodies broken by diseases their medical technology couldn't understand. The shuttle pilot, Commander Hex, looked at the survivors in shock. "Where is everyone? Where is Commander Bale? Where is the army?" Private Rex, the youngest survivor, looked at him with dead eyes. "The jungle ate them," he whispered. "The whole planet is alive and it ate them all." 2 weeks later, the survivors arrived at the Krek's homeworld. They were taken immediately to the High Command, where the greatest military minds in the galaxy waited to hear their report. The testimony was devastating. Private Rex spoke of insects that carried death in their bite. Sergeant Tox described plants that released poison gas. Corporal Vex told of predators that hunted by night and disappeared by day, but it was Lieutenant Zorn, the highest-ranking survivor, who delivered the most important message. "Honored commanders," he said, his voice shaking, "we did not lose to human weapons or human armies. We lost to the planet itself. Earth is not just a world, it is a weapon. Every living thing on that planet has evolved to kill. The humans are not its masters. They are its partners." The silence in the command chamber was absolute. For the first time in Krek's history, a military operation had ended in complete defeat. Not tactical defeat. Not strategic defeat. Complete annihilation. Within days, the report reached the Galactic Council. Emergency sessions were called. Every major species in the galaxy read the testimony with growing horror. The humans of Earth were not just dangerous because of their technology or their numbers. They were dangerous because they had evolved alongside the most lethal planet in known space. The vote was unanimous. Earth was classified as a Class XX death world, the first planet ever to receive such a designation. The Sol system was declared a quarantine zone. No alien species would be permitted to approach within 1 light year of the planet. But the story's final chapter was written on Earth itself. In a small village deep in the Amazon, Elder Taka sat with his grandson Joe by the evening fire. The jungle around them hummed with life, dangerous, beautiful, eternal. "Grandfather," Joe asked, "will the Sky Warriors return?" Taka smiled and looked up at the stars. "Perhaps someday, but now they know the truth. Earth does not belong to the strongest or the most advanced. Earth belongs to those who understand that true strength comes from living in harmony with forces greater than yourself." He paused and listened to the night sounds of the jungle, his home, his partner in the ancient dance of life and death. "The Sky Warriors learned that lesson too late," he said softly. "Let us hope others are wiser." High above them, alien ships continued to patrol the edge of the solar system, watching and waiting. But they came no closer. The 8 survivors had delivered their message clearly. Earth was not to be conquered. Earth was to be avoided at all costs. The galaxy had been warned.